It was a peaceful evening, and I had just finished getting ready for bed. Just as I was about to climb into bed, my husband, James, walked into the room. There was a playful look on his face, and I could see something in his eyes that made me pause. His smile was wide, like he had a secret he couldn't wait to share. I knew that look well. Over the years, my husband, James, had surprised me many times, always finding new ways to keep our relationship exciting. But tonight, there was something different in the air. It wasn't just the usual playfulness we often shared, it felt deeper, more intense, like an unspoken understanding between us. James slowly walked toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. There was a gentleness in his movements, but also a sense of purpose that made my heart race. As he stood in front of me, he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. As I climbed into bed, the soft sheets cool against my skin, I noticed James standing at the foot of the bed. His eyes were focused on me, full of a kind of quiet intensity that made my heart beat just a little faster. I could tell he had something on his mind. The room was silent, except for the sound of our breathing, and the way he looked at me made me feel like something important was about to happen. He stood there for a moment, just watching me, before he finally spoke. "I have something I want to ask you," he said, his voice low and serious. It wasn't his usual playful tone, which made me curious. I raised an eyebrow, my heart now thumping in my chest. "What is it?" I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. I couldn't help but feel a little excited. James always had a way of keeping me on my toes, always surprising me with something new. But this time, there was something different in the way he spoke, something that made me feel like this was more than just a simple request. Slowly, James walked around the bed and sat down beside me. He reached out and gently took my hand in his fingers warm and strong. I looked into his eyes and saw something there, a mix of excitement and tenderness, like he had been thinking about this for a while and was finally ready to share it with me. "Trust me," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. His eyes searched mine, looking for that trust, that connection we had built over the years. "I want to try something new tonight." James positioned himself near the edge of the bed and asked me to lie back. "Spread your legs," he said softly, almost hesitantly, as if he was testing the waters. I could feel my pulse quicken at his words. This wasn't like anything we'd ever done before. I slowly parted my legs, and he knelt between them, his eyes filled with both love and an intensity one hadn't seen in a long time. "I want to show you something," he murmured. He reached out, gently brushing his fingers along my skin. I felt vulnerable, but there was something exciting about this vulnerability. My husband, James, had always made me feel safe, and tonight was no different. I closed my eyes, letting myself relax into the moment. What happened next was something I didn't expect at all. James leaned in closer, and I could see the look in his eyes. He placed his hands gently on my thighs, making me feel a little nervous but also excited. I could feel his warm breath against my skin, and it sent shivers up my spine. I had never felt anything like it before. Then, to my surprise, he did something I never thought he would do. He kissed me right there. It was a soft and gentle kiss, like a whisper. It felt special and intimate, as if we were in our own little world, away from everything else. I could hardly believe it was happening, and my heart started to race. A soft gasp escaped my lips as the feeling washed over me like a warm wave. It wasn't just something I felt in my body, there was something deep inside my heart too. What James was doing felt special and different. He had always been sweet and thoughtful, but this was something much more. It felt like he really cared about me in a way I had never felt before. I could see it in his eyes and the way he moved. It was as if he wanted to know every part of me, not just the outside but the inside too. This new level of care and devotion made my heart flutter with happiness. I realized that this was not just a simple moment, it was something magical, something that made me feel connected to him in a way I hadn't expected. I wanted to hold on to this feeling forever, like a beautiful memory I could keep in my heart. I slowly opened my eyes and looked down at James. He was gazing back up at me with a warm smile, and I noticed his eyes sparkled with affection and desire. In that moment, I understood something very important. He loved me deeply, not just as his wife, but as a woman who deserved to be cherished and admired. It felt like I was seeing him in a whole new light. The way he looked at me made me feel special, as if I was the most important person in the world to him. I could see that he appreciated everything about me, from my laughter to my dreams. This love was so powerful, it filled my heart with joy and made me feel safe. I realized that I was not just someone he was married to, I was someone he truly valued and respected. In his eyes, I saw a promise of love that was deep and everlasting, and it made me feel incredibly happy and loved. As the night went on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how James continued to surprise me, even after years of being together. It wasn't just about the act itself, it was about the way he made me feel cherished, desired, and understood. For the first time, I saw James not just as my husband, but as someone who could push boundaries and still maintain the core of our relationship. He was exploring a deeper side of intimacy, one that went beyond the physical and tapped into something more emotional and spiritual. Afterward, we didn't say anything. There was no need for words. The connection we had felt in that moment spoke volumes. As we lay there, side by side, our hands intertwined, I realized that this was a new chapter in our relationship. James looked over at me, his face soft and peaceful. "How do you feel?" he asked, breaking the silence. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Surprised, I admitted, but in a good way. That night had opened a door to something new in our relationship. We began to explore each other in ways we hadn't before. James had always been attentive to my needs, but now, it felt like we were on a journey of rediscovery together. We talked more openly about our desires, our fears, and our fantasies. It was liberating to have those conversations without fear of judgment or rejection. I realized that intimacy wasn't just about the physical, it was about being vulnerable with each other in every way. As our relationship deepened, so did the trust between us. My husband James had always been my rock, but now, I felt like I could share anything with him, even my most private thoughts and feelings. It was as if that night had opened a door to a deeper connection between us. We started spending more time together, not just in the bedroom but in every aspect of our lives. We laughed more, shared more, and loved more openly. I felt like we were rediscovering the magic that had brought us together in the first place. My husband James continued to surprise me, not just in the bedroom but in every aspect of our relationship. He was more attentive, more affectionate, and more open with his feelings. It was as if that night had brought us closer together in ways I hadn't imagined. One evening, as we were lying in bed, I decided to share my thoughts with James. "You've really surprised me," I admitted. "I didn't expect things to change so much after all these years." James smiled, pulling me closer. "I've always wanted to make you happy," he said softly. "I guess I just found new ways to show it." The more we explored each other emotionally and physically, the more I realized how much love we still had to give. It was as if we were discovering new layers to our relationship, layers that had been there all along but hadn't been fully explored. One night, after another intimate moment, we stayed up talking late into the night. James shared things with me that he hadn't shared before, his insecurities, his dreams, and his fears. I listened intently, amazed at how vulnerable he was willing to be with me. "I've always been afraid that I wouldn't be enough for you," he confessed. "But I want to keep surprising you, keep making you happy." Hearing him open up like that made my heart swell. "You've always been more than enough," I reassured him, gently stroking his face. "And every day, you prove that to me." One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, we found ourselves laughing together about the most random things. The joy in the simplicity of our relationship had become a cornerstone of our happiness. That night, as we lay in bed, something felt different. There was an undeniable sense of closeness, as if our bond had reached its deepest point. James, always one to surprise me, suggested something unusual, something playful and spontaneous. He gently pulled me off the bed, and before I knew it, we were under the bed, hidden in that small, intimate space. The laughter between us faded, replaced by the quiet intensity of the moment. What started as playful quickly became passionate. Under the low ceiling of the bed, we connected in a way we hadn't before. There was something about the confined space, the warmth of the night, and the deep love we shared that made it unforgettable. That night, unbeknownst to us, marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Weeks passed, and I began to feel strange. Little things I'd never noticed before: fatigue, nausea, and a change in my appetite. It didn't take long before I realized what was happening. I was pregnant. The realization hit me like a wave, but it was a wave of pure joy. When I told James, his eyes lit up with excitement. We had always talked about starting a family, but now that it was actually happening, it felt like a dream come true. Months later, after what felt like both an eternity and the shortest time of my life, the day arrived. To our surprise, I gave birth to not just one child, but 2 twins. A boy and a girl. The joy was overwhelming, and James, always calm in every situation, shed tears of happiness as he held them in his arms. Looking at our twins, I realized that everything we had been through had led us to this moment. The trust, the intimacy, the growth we had experienced together, it had all prepared us to become the parents we now were. Life with twins was chaotic, but in the best possible way. Every sleepless night, every tired morning, and every moment of joy reminded us of the love we had built together. Our relationship had transformed from something beautiful into something extraordinary, and now, we were building a family on that foundation. As I watched James care for our children with the same tenderness and love he had shown me all those years, I realized how lucky I was to have him. We had gone through so much together, from moments of vulnerability and passion to laughter and tears. Each experience had strengthened our bond and prepared us for this new chapter as parents. James and I often talked about the night under the bed, laughing at the spontaneity of it and marveling at how it led to the greatest surprise of our lives. Our twins became the living proof of our love, a reminder that love, when nurtured, can bring forth the most unexpected and wonderful blessings. And so, our journey continued not just as husband and wife, but as a family. Life wasn't always perfect, but with James by my side, I knew we could handle anything that came our way. We had built something strong and lasting, and now, we had the joy of sharing it with our two beautiful children. In the end, love had surprised us in more ways than one. It had brought us closer together, it had taught us how to trust and communicate, and it had given us the greatest gift of all, our family. And as we looked forward to the future, I knew that our love would continue to grow, evolve, and surprise us in ways we could never imagine.